Eleanor was 87 years old, a woman with silver hair that shone even under the city's dim lights. She had once lived in a small house filled with warmth and laughter, but time and fate had slowly taken everything away from her. Now she lived on the streets, her only companion being her 4-year-old granddaughter. Lily, they had nowhere to go, no one to turn to, and nothing to call their own except each other. Every morning, Eleanor would wake up before the sun, wrapping Lily in her worn-out coat to protect her from the morning chill. The streets were never quiet. Cars rushed by, people hurried to work, but no one noticed the old woman and the tiny girl sitting near the corner of the station. Sometimes people dropped coins in the paper cup Eleanor kept beside her, but most just walked past. Pretending not to see, still she never complained. She only whispered soft words to Lily, telling her that better days would come. Lily was small, with curly hair that always fell over her eyes. She had a smile that could melt even the coldest heart. And though she didn't have toys or fancy clothes, she was full of joy. Her grandmother was her whole world. And she loved the stories Eleanor told every night before they fell asleep on an old blanket near the wall. Eleanor would tell her tales about angels, about songs that could make flowers bloom, about kindness that still existed in the world. Those stories were the only way she could protect Lily's innocence from the harsh truth around them. Music had always been Eleanor's secret comfort. When she was young, she used to play the piano at a local cafe, her fingers gliding across the keys like a soft breeze. Back then, music paid the bills, lifted her heart, and made strangers smile. But after her daughter, Lily's mother, passed away suddenly, Eleanor lost everything. She spent all her savings trying to care for her granddaughter. And when that ran out, the landlord asked them to leave. From that day on, the streets became their home. Even though life was cruel, Eleanor never let go of the music in her heart sometimes. She would hum softly while Lily rested in her lap. It was never a sad tune, it was gentle and full of hope. Lily loved it so much that she would sway side to side, clapping her tiny hands in rhythm. "Grandma, sing more," she would say, her voice as sweet as morning sunlight. Eleanor would smile and hum again, louder this time, letting the melody wash away her pain. There was something magical about those moments. For a few minutes, the hunger, the cold, and the loneliness disappeared. It was just the two of them and the song that made them feel alive again. People passing by would sometimes pause for a second, hearing the faint tune. They didn't know where it came from, but it touched something deep inside them. Even the wind seemed to slow down when Eleanor sang, as if the whole city wanted to listen. At night, when the world fell silent, Eleanor would look at the stars and talk to them softly. She told them about her worries, her fears, and her dreams for little Lily. She didn't wish for riches or fame, only for a roof over their heads and a chance for her granddaughter to have a better life. Lily, half asleep beside her, would reach out and hold her hand. That simple touch gave Eleanor strength, reminding her that love was stronger than despair. Sometimes, they found shelter in the train station when the weather was too harsh. The floor was cold, but at least it was dry. Eleanor would make a small pillow from her old shawl for Lily, tucking her in as gently as she could. Then when Lily slept, Eleanor would quietly hum again. This time for herself, it was her way of praying, of telling the universe that she hadn't given up. Her voice was weak but steady. Each note carried memories of her youth, her family, and the home she had lost. The melody echoed softly through the empty station, blending with the sound of the trains. It was a song of sadness, but also of love, the kind of love that refuses to die. If anyone had been awake to listen, they would have felt their heart tighten, because that song was full of truth. It spoke of struggle, of aging, of innocence, and of hope that refused to fade. Eleanor often wondered if music could still change lives. She didn't have an answer, but she kept believing. Somehow, deep in her soul, she knew that music had power. It had carried her this far. After all, and as long as Lily was by her side, she would keep singing, no matter how hard the days were, no matter how long the nights felt. She would keep their song alive. The streets might have taken away her home, but not her spirit, and in the quiet corners of the city, between the noise and the neon lights, there lived an old woman and a little girl together. They created a melody that no one could hear. Yet it was there, echoing softly in the heart of every person who still believed in love. The rain fell harder that day, cold and unkind, tapping against the cracked pavement like tiny fingers of fate. Eleanor pulled her coat tighter around Lily, shielding her from the wind that bit through their thin layers. They had been walking for hours, searching for a dry place to rest. Lily's little shoes were soaked, her small hands clutching her grandmother's fingers tightly. "Grandma, my toes are dancing in the rain," she said with a giggle. And despite her exhaustion, Eleanor smiled. That was the magic of Lily. She could find laughter even in misery. The city lights shimmered through the rain like blurred stars. Every doorway they passed was either locked or filled with others seeking shelter. Finally, at the far end of the train station, Eleanor spotted an old waiting area, dusty, forgotten, and quiet. It looked abandoned, with broken benches and posters peeling off the walls, but it was dry and that was all that mattered. She led Lily inside, her shoes making soft squishing sounds against the floor. They sat on the bench, breathing out clouds of cold air, listening to the distant echo of trains coming and going. That was when Eleanor noticed it. Hidden behind a pillar, half covered in dust and spiderwebs, stood a piano. Its wood was faded and some of the keys were chipped, but it was still beautiful in a strange, lonely way. It was the kind of piano that seemed to hold stories, of laughter, tears and moments that time had forgotten. Eleanor's heart gave a little jump, the sight pulling her back to a past she had buried long ago. Her hands trembled slightly as she stepped closer, each footstep stirring up tiny clouds of dust. Lily followed her, her eyes wide with curiosity. "What is it, Grandma?" she asked softly. Eleanor smiled, her wrinkled face lighting up with a glow Lily hadn't seen in a long time. "It's a piano, my dear, an instrument that sings when you touch it," she said gently. Lily tilted her head, trying to understand. "Like you sing?" she asked. Eleanor chuckled, her voice shaking a little. "Something like that. But this one has its own kind of magic." Eleanor ran her fingers over the keys, feeling the cold smoothness under her skin. For a moment she hesitated, afraid the sound might be broken, afraid that after all these years, she might have forgotten how to play. But then Lily tugged her sleeve and whispered, "Play for me, Grandma." And just like that, Eleanor took a deep breath and pressed the first key. A single note echoed through the empty station, weak but clear. It hung in the air like a fragile thread of memory. Eleanor closed her eyes and pressed another key. Then another soon. A melody began to form. Trembling at first. Like a bird learning to fly, Lily's eyes lit up. She clapped her hands and started to sway side to side, her laughter blending with the music. Eleanor's old fingers moved with surprising grace, remembering the patterns her heart never forgot. The music filled the station, soft and haunting. Each note carried pieces of Eleanor's soul, her pain, her love, her years of silence. The sound wrapped around the cold walls, pushing back the loneliness that had lived there for so long. Even the rain outside seemed to slow down, listening quietly to the forgotten piano come back to life. Lily stood beside her grandmother, her tiny hands trying to press a few keys. Her laughter echoed like silver bells, pure and full of joy. Eleanor looked at her and smiled through tears. "This is our song now, Lily," she said softly. "A song for the rain, for the cold, and for the brave little girl who never stopped smiling." Lily nodded, though she didn't fully understand, and whispered, "I love our song, Grandma." As they played, a janitor passing through stopped in his tracks. He stood at a distance, listening in silence. He had seen countless people come and go in that station, but never anything like this. An old woman and a child creating magic from nothing. He felt his throat tighten, blinking back tears before he knew it. Others had noticed too. A few travelers, a security guard, even a young woman with a suitcase. They all stood quietly watching. Their busy lives paused for a moment. The sight was simple yet powerful. Two souls lost in the world, finding peace through music. Eleanor's song wasn't perfect, but it was pure. It carried a truth no words could express. The crowd didn't clap, they just stood there, eyes glistening, hearts stirred by something real. When the final note faded, the station fell silent again. Eleanor opened her eyes slowly, realizing they had an audience. For a second she looked embarrassed, her wrinkled hands trembling over the keys. Then someone started clapping, softly at first, then louder until the sound filled the air. Eleanor blushed. Lily giggled, and the little girl bowed dramatically, making everyone laugh. In that moment, Eleanor felt something she hadn't felt in years. Dignity, warmth, belonging. She wasn't just a homeless old woman anymore. She was a musician again, a grandmother. A light in the dark, Lily hugged her tightly. whispering, "You're the best." "Grandma," and Eleanor, holding her close, whispered back, "No, my love, we are." That night, when they finally lay down to rest in their corner of the station, Eleanor's heart felt lighter. For the first time in years, she believed that maybe, just maybe, life still had something beautiful waiting for them. And as Lily fell asleep in her arms, Eleanor closed her eyes, the sound of the piano still echoing softly in her mind. A forgotten instrument had found its voice again, and with it, two forgotten souls had begun to dream once more. The next morning came quietly, with soft sunlight sneaking through the dusty glass windows of the station. Eleanor opened her eyes slowly, her body stiff from sleeping on the hard bench. For a moment she forgot where she was, but then she heard it, a faint giggle, light and pure. Lily was sitting cross-legged in front of the piano, her little fingers hovering above the keys. As if waiting for them to speak first, Eleanor smiled to herself. That tiny sound of laughter was enough to make the whole world feel alive again. The piano stood there, old yet proud, its surface gleaming faintly under the sunlight. Something about it felt different now, as if the music they had played the night before had awakened its soul. Eleanor walked closer, her steps soft, her hands trembling, not from age this time, but from excitement. "Do you want to play again, my dear?" she asked gently. Lily nodded, her curls bouncing as she said, "Yes, Grandma. Let's make the piano happy again." Those words melted Eleanor's heart. To a child, even a broken piano could be a friend, a piece of magic waiting to be touched. She lifted Lily and sat her beside her on the worn-out stool. Their shoulders touching, Eleanor placed her old, wrinkled fingers on the keys and Lily copied her movements, giggling every time the piano made a sound. "Listen carefully," Eleanor whispered. "Every key has its own voice. Just like people." Lily pressed a note and smiled. "This one sounds like you, Grandma," she said, and Eleanor laughed softly, wiping a tear from her eye. Eleanor began to play a simple tune, one she remembered from her younger days. It was a song she had written long ago for her daughter. Lily's mother. The melody was slow and tender, carrying a feeling of love that time could never erase. Her fingers moved across the keys like a gentle breeze, shaping sound into memory. Lily watched in awe, her tiny hands following along, sometimes pressing the wrong notes, sometimes just clapping to the rhythm, and yet every mistake seemed to make the moment more beautiful, more human. The sound floated through the air, echoing softly between the walls. It reached the people waiting on the platforms, the workers sweeping the floors, even the guard who tried not to cry the night before. One by one, they turned their heads, drawn by the same melody that had touched their hearts yesterday. There was something unexplainable about it, something that made everyone stop, listen, and remember that there was still beauty in the world. Eleanor closed her eyes and let the music carry her. In her mind, she was no longer an old woman sitting on a broken stool. She was young again, sitting in the cafe where she used to play, her husband smiling at her from across the room, her daughter dancing in circles nearby. The music brought it all back, the laughter, the warmth, the dream she thought she had lost forever. Her tears mixed with the melody, but she didn't stop. She couldn't stop. Lily felt it too, even though she didn't understand it completely. She could sense that her grandmother's heart was telling a story through the notes. So she added her own piece there, pressing random keys, humming along, laughing when a sound came out funny. To Eleanor, it was perfect. Because music wasn't about perfection, it was about feeling. And Lily was all feeling, pure and innocent. The people watching began to smile. Some recorded the moment on their phones. Others just closed their eyes and listened. The tune was simple, but it carried something that words could never say. A young woman nearby whispered to her friend, "That's the most beautiful thing I've ever heard." Another man, who had been frowning just minutes earlier, wiped his eyes quietly, pretending it was the dust. Eleanor finished the song with a soft final note. Holding it a little longer than she meant to, the sound lingered in the air, gentle and fading, like the last light of sunset. For a few seconds there was silence, the kind of silence that doesn't feel empty but full. Then a small voice broke it. "Again, Grandma, again," Lily said, clapping her hands excitedly. Her face glowing with joy, Eleanor laughed, her heart swelling with love. "All right, my dear. Let's make the music dance one more time." And so they played again, not just once but many times that morning. Each song was different, one fast, one slow, one filled with laughter, one soft as a whisper. They played until the morning turned into afternoon. until the crowd thinned and the world around them moved on. But for Eleanor and Lily, time didn't matter anymore. They weren't playing for the world. They were playing for each other. As the last train of the day passed by, a gust of warm air swept through the station. Rustling Eleanor's gray hair, she looked down at Lily, who had fallen asleep on her lap, her tiny hand resting on the piano keys. Eleanor smiled, her heart full of peace. She whispered to the piano softly, "Thank you for listening, old friend." And for a brief moment she could have sworn she heard a soft reply, a faint echo. Like a sigh of gratitude, outside the rain had stopped. The streets were shining, reflecting the golden glow of the setting sun. And in that quiet corner of the station, surrounded by strangers who had become witnesses, an old woman and a little girl had reminded the world that even the smallest song could heal the biggest wounds. The music that day wasn't just a melody. It was a memory reborn, a heartbeat shared between generations, between past and present, between love and loss. And though the piano would one day fall silent again, the song they created together would live on, in the hearts of all who heard it, a song of hope, of courage, and of the beautiful power of the first notes. The sound of the piano spread through the station like a soft whisper turning into a wave. It carried through the air, across the echoing halls, through the chatter of travelers and the hum of arriving trains. It wasn't loud or grand, but it had something rare, something pure that made people stop and listen. An old woman with trembling hands and a little girl with laughter in her voice were making music that touched souls. At first, only a few people noticed. A man in a brown coat paused mid-step. Holding his coffee cup, a mother with a stroller slowed down, her baby quieting as if listening too. Even the ticket clerk, who had been boredly tapping his pen, leaned slightly over the counter, curious. There was something magnetic about the melody, like it was calling out to forgotten feelings deep inside every person who heard it. Eleanor didn't notice the growing audience at first. Her eyes were closed, her fingers dancing lightly across the worn keys. She was lost in the music. Lost in memories beside her, Lily giggled and hummed, pressing random notes that somehow fit perfectly into the rhythm. To them, this wasn't a performance, and it was a moment, something alive between them, the sound of love and survival, of a bond unbroken by the world's cruelty. The man in the brown coat stepped closer. He had rushed through this same station every morning for years, never looking at anyone, never stopping for anything. But now he stood still, his chest tight, eyes glistening. He thought about his own mother, the one he hadn't visited in months. A single note from that old piano had reached a place in him he didn't know still existed. More people gathered slowly, drawn by invisible threads of emotion. A group of teenagers stopped taking selfies and began recording the scene quietly. A little boy tugged on his father's sleeve, whispering, "She's like my grandma." An elderly couple sat on a nearby bench, holding hands as they listened. The crowd wasn't loud or restless, and it was peaceful, united by something they couldn't name. Eleanor opened her eyes for a moment and gasped softly. She hadn't realized how many people were standing there. Dozens of faces, all watching her, all smiling gently for a second. She felt shy. Her hands hesitated above the keys, her heart beating fast. But then she felt a small hand slip into hers. Lily looked up at her with her big brown eyes and whispered, "Don't stop, Grandma, they like our song." And just like that, Eleanor smiled, took a deep breath, and continued to play. The melody changed, brighter now, full of life and hope. Lily started singing a made-up tune, her little voice echoing through the hall. The sound was imperfect, but it was beautiful. Even people hurrying to catch their trains slowed down to listen for a few seconds. For once, the station wasn't just a place of movement. It became a place of meaning. A young woman near the front wiped her eyes and whispered to her friend, "Look at them, they have nothing, but they're happier than we are." The friend nodded, recording quietly, her hands trembling a little. The sound of the piano rose again, stronger this time, and the air seemed to shimmer with feeling. It was as if the world outside, the rain, the noise, the rush, had all paused just to listen. Eleanor's fingers began to ache, but she didn't stop. Her body was weak, but her heart was strong. Every note was a prayer, every chord a promise. She wasn't just playing music, she was telling her story, the story of every person who had ever been forgotten and still found the strength to smile. And in that moment, everyone listening became part of that story too. A man in a business suit stood at the back, clutching his briefcase. He had been stressed and angry all morning. But as he listened, something inside him softened. He didn't know why, but tears rolled down his cheeks. He wasn't alone. Even the janitor who had seen it all stood nearby, wiping his eyes with the back of his hand. The music had done what words never could. It had broken through walls, reaching hearts directly. When the song finally came to an end, silence filled the air. It was the kind of silence that holds its breath. Gentle, sacred. No one moved, no one spoke. They just stood there, holding on to the last note as if it were something precious. Then a single clap broke the stillness, followed by another. Soon the entire station erupted in applause. Soft at first, then louder, full of warmth and admiration. Eleanor blinked in surprise, tears spilling down her cheeks. Lily laughed and clapped along, her little hands echoing the rhythm of the crowd. For a moment the world seemed brighter, kinder. Strangers smiled at each other. Strangers shared something real. A moment of beauty that needed no language. A woman stepped forward, handing Lily a small flower from her bag. "Your music made my day," she said softly, her voice trembling. Lily smiled shyly and looked up at her grandmother. Eleanor whispered, "Say thank you, my love." And Lily said it with a grin that melted every heart around her. The crowd slowly began to drift away, but no one left quite the same as they had arrived. The music lingered in their minds. In their hearts, some walked away smiling, others still wiping their eyes. But all of them carried a piece of that song with them, a reminder that kindness and hope can come from the most unexpected places. As the station grew quiet again, Eleanor looked at Lily. Her voice was soft but full of emotion as she said, "You see, my darling, music can touch people even when you have nothing else." Lily nodded, leaning against her, whispering, "Then let's never stop playing, Grandma." Eleanor smiled, kissed her forehead and whispered, "We won't, my little star. We never will." And somewhere deep in that station, the old piano seemed to hum quietly, as if it too was smiling. It had once been forgotten, but now it had found its purpose again. And through its tired keys, an old woman and a little girl had reminded the world that even the smallest melody could gather hearts like a miracle. That evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon and the lights of the city began to glow, the train station slowly emptied. The rush of footsteps faded, leaving behind only the faint hum of late-night travelers. Eleanor and Lily sat quietly beside the piano, tired but happy, their hearts still warm from the applause that had filled the air hours earlier. Eleanor brushed a strand of hair from Lily's forehead and smiled, her wrinkled face glowing softly under the flickering station lights. "You did beautifully today, my darling," she whispered. And Lily giggled. The piano was happy too. "Grandma." A few feet away, a young woman sat on a bench with her phone in her hand. She had recorded the entire performance earlier, not thinking much of it at the time, but now as she replayed the video, she felt tears roll down her cheeks, the music, the laughter, the tenderness between the grandmother and the child. It was all so raw, so real. She didn't know their names, but she knew the world needed to see them. With shaking fingers, she uploaded the video to her social media page. She typed only one caption: "This is what love sounds like." That night, while Eleanor and Lily curled up under their old blanket near the piano, the world outside began to stir. Within hours, the video started spreading. At first, a few likes, then a few shares, and then a flood. People from across the city began watching the moment where an 87-year-old woman played an old piano with her 4-year-old granddaughter. The sight of their joy, their connection, and their music melted hearts everywhere. Thousands of comments poured in. "I'm crying," wrote one user. "This is the most beautiful thing I've ever seen," said another. Musicians, artists, and strangers from all walks of life shared it, each adding their own message of love and admiration. Within a day, the video had millions of views. People called it the song of the streets, a melody of love that spoke louder than words. Meanwhile, back in the station, Eleanor knew nothing about the storm of kindness that had started online. She woke up to the sound of Lily humming in her sleep. She looked at her granddaughter's peaceful face and felt grateful. Even if tomorrow was uncertain, this moment was enough. But outside, change was already on its way. A local journalist saw the video and decided to find them. He spent the next morning asking around the station, showing people the clip on his phone. Most had already seen it. "Oh yes," said a janitor proudly. "That's Miss Eleanor and little Lily. They play every day." When the reporter finally found them, Eleanor was sitting on her usual bench, polishing the piano keys with a small piece of cloth. Lily was beside her, singing softly to herself. "Excuse me," the reporter said gently. "Are you the ones who played yesterday?" Eleanor looked up, surprised and slightly nervous. "Yes," she said slowly. "Was the music too loud?" The man smiled, shaking his head. "No, ma'am, it was perfect." "And the whole world thinks so too." Eleanor frowned in confusion, not understanding. He showed her the video on his phone, her wrinkled hands dancing across the keys, Lily laughing beside her. The crowd clapping, Eleanor gasped softly, covering her mouth. She had never seen herself like that before, not as a tired old woman, but as someone full of grace and light. "People loved your song," the reporter said. "It's everywhere now. Millions have watched it." Lily peeked over curiously. "Millions? Is that more than 100? Everyone laughed, even Eleanor, who wiped away a tear. She couldn't believe it. Their little tune, their small act of love, had touched so many hearts. By that evening, news crews arrived. Cameras flashing, reporters asking questions. Some called her the piano grandma. Others simply called her Hope. Eleanor didn't care about the fame. She just wanted to make sure Lily wasn't scared. She held her close during every interview, whispering, "It's all right, my little one. They just want to hear our story." And when someone asked her what inspired her to play, Eleanor smiled and said softly, "When life gives you silence, you make your own music." Soon, offers of help began to pour in. People wanted to donate money. Others wanted to find her a home. A local cafe offered to host a small concert so she could play on stage again. Charities reached out, musicians offered pianos, and children wrote letters saying how her song made them believe in kindness again. Eleanor was overwhelmed. She had never asked for help, but the love coming her way felt like a blessing she didn't know she needed. That night, when the cameras were gone and the lights were off, Eleanor sat at the piano again. The station was quiet, but the air still felt different. She placed her hands on the keys and whispered, "Thank you." Not to anyone in particular, just to life. For still holding surprises even after so many hard years. Lily sat beside her, swinging her legs. "Grandma," she said softly, "do you think the world heard our song?" Eleanor smiled, pressing a single note, letting it echo through the empty hall. "Yes, my darling," she whispered. "I think they did. The world might be big, the internet even bigger, but somehow a small act of love had found its way through all of it. Two souls who had nothing to their names had given millions something priceless, a reminder that beauty still exists in the most unexpected corners." And as the night grew darker, the old piano shimmered faintly under the lights. It had once been forgotten, but now it carried a story that had traveled across screens, across borders, across hearts. Eleanor didn't need to see the numbers, the views, or the fame for her. The real miracle wasn't the video. It was the look in Lily's eyes, the sound of laughter after so many years of silence. And in that quiet moment, with her granddaughter asleep in her lap, she realized something simple yet powerful. Sometimes the smallest song can reach the loudest hearts. Sometimes a single act of love can echo louder than any fame. And sometimes the world doesn't just listen, it feels. The morning sun crept gently through the high windows of the train station, painting everything in soft golden light. Eleanor woke up slowly, stretching her stiff arms, the sound of distant footsteps echoing through the hall. Lily was still asleep beside her, clutching her small teddy bear, its fur worn thin but loved beyond measure. Eleanor smiled as she watched her, whispering a quiet prayer of thanks. For the first time in a long while, her heart felt light, though she didn't yet know that the world outside had changed forever. As the city woke up, the internet buzzed with their story. Messages of love and kindness poured in from every corner of the world. People who had never met Eleanor or Lily were writing about them, about the music that had made them cry, about the hope that still lived in a grandmother's hands. Some said the video reminded them to call their parents. Some said it made them want to learn piano again, and some just said, "Thank you for reminding me that beauty still exists." Later that morning, while Eleanor helped Lily wash her face in the station restroom, a young man approached her. He was holding a camera and wearing a bright smile. "Mrs. Eleanor?" he asked kindly. Eleanor turned, surprised. "Yes, that's me," she said softly. He handed her a small envelope and said, "This is from our community. We wanted to help." Inside was a folded note and a stack of bills, enough money for food, clothes, and maybe even a few nights in a warm place. Eleanor's hands shook as she held it. tears filling her eyes. "I don't know what to say," she whispered. The young man smiled. "You already said it through your music." "Ma'am," news of the piano grandma continued to spread. Within days, the train station became a place of gathering. People brought flowers, food, and toys for Lily. Musicians came with guitars and violins, playing alongside the old piano, turning that once lonely hall into a place filled with laughter and song. Lily loved it the most, dancing around, her little shoes tapping in rhythm, her giggles echoing through the space. And every time someone asked Eleanor to play, she did, and not for fame, but because she could feel the love in the air. One afternoon, a woman from a local charity arrived. She was gentle and kind, with warm eyes that reminded Eleanor of her daughter. "Mrs. Eleanor," she said softly, "we've seen your story, and we want to help you and Lily find a real home." Eleanor blinked in disbelief. "A home?" she repeated, her voice trembling. The woman nodded. "Yes. A safe place, no more sleeping on benches, no more cold nights." Eleanor couldn't speak. Her throat tight with emotion, she looked down at Lily, who was busy coloring on a piece of cardboard, and whispered, "Did you hear that, my love? A home." Lily looked up, smiling brightly. "With a bed, Grandma? And maybe a window?" Eleanor nodded, tears slipping down her cheeks. "Yes, my darling, with a window." The community didn't stop there. A local music shop offered to restore the old piano, promising to make it sound as beautiful as new. A cafe nearby invited Eleanor and Lily to play every weekend, saying, "Your music brings people together." Even schools invited them to visit, so children could meet the little girl who sang with her grandma. It was as if the whole city had decided to give something back, to repay the gift of love and hope that Eleanor's song had given them. But through all the attention and kindness, Eleanor remained humble. She never boasted, never demanded, she just smiled, said thank you, and kept reminding everyone, it wasn't me, it was the music. It was love, and the truth was, where people didn't just fall in love with her song, they fell in love with her spirit. Her wrinkles told stories, her voice carried calm, and her eyes, though tired, still sparkled like the stars she used to wish upon. One day, a man who owned a small house by the park came to meet her. He said, "I saw your story, and I want you both to live here rent-free. For as long as you need." Eleanor tried to refuse at first, shaking her head. "Sir, that's too much," but he smiled and said, "No, ma'am. It's too little compared to what you've given us." Lily jumped up and down with joy. "A house! Grandma, a real house!" Eleanor held her close, whispering through tears, "Yes, my sweet girl. We're finally going home." The day they moved in, the entire neighborhood showed up to help. Someone brought curtains, another brought a rug. Someone else brought groceries. A small van arrived with a surprise, the piano from the station, newly polished and shining. When Eleanor saw it being rolled into the living room, she covered her mouth with both hands, unable to stop crying. It was the same piano, the one that had once stood in a dark corner, now reborn just like her life that evening. As the sun set behind the trees, Eleanor sat by the window while Lily played near the piano. The air smelled of fresh bread and flowers, the sound of laughter floating through the house. Eleanor closed her eyes, her heart full to the brim. She whispered softly, "Thank you, world, for hearing our song." Outside, the lights of the city shimmered like stars, and in that little home, music played once again, not from pain but from peace. The story of the homeless grandmother and her granddaughter had become a story of love returned. People realized that kindness was like music. Once shared, it always finds its way back. And as Lily's laughter echoed through their new home, Eleanor smiled, because she knew that they hadn't just been given a house. They had been given a new beginning, a new chapter born from the simplest thing in the world, a song, a heart, and a little bit of hope. The first morning in their new home felt like a dream that had finally come true. For years, Eleanor had opened her eyes to the cold gray walls of train stations, to the sound of footsteps and rain, but now, she woke to soft sunlight touching her face, the smell of bread baking from a neighbor's kitchen, and the sound of birds singing just outside the window. She turned her head and saw Lily still asleep, wrapped in a pink blanket someone had gifted them, her small chest rising and falling gently. Eleanor smiled, tears filling her eyes, whispering softly, "We made it, my little one." We finally made it. The house was small but full of love. There were cracks in the walls and old creaky floors, but to Eleanor it felt like a palace. Every corner carried warmth, Every sound felt like music. In the living room stood their precious piano, polished and shining under the morning light. Lily had already decorated it with flowers from the garden, saying it needed to smell happy. Eleanor ran her hands gently over the keys, whispering, "You brought us home, old friend." That first week was like a new life beginning. Neighbors came to visit every day, bringing gifts and smiles. Children from nearby homes would stop by after school to see Lily, who proudly showed them the piano. Sometimes they all sang together while Eleanor played, their laughter echoing through the house like a beautiful melody. It wasn't just a home. It was a place where music had built a family. Lily loved helping her grandmother in every little thing. She watered the plants, helped bake bread, and always ended the day sitting beside Eleanor. Learning new notes on the piano, she picked up quickly, her tiny fingers finding their way across the keys with innocent curiosity. "Grandma," she said one evening, "when I play, I feel happy inside. Like the music is hugging me." Eleanor smiled softly, brushing a curl from Lily's forehead. "That's what music does, my darling. It hugs your heart even when no one else can." Soon, word spread around the neighborhood about the grandmother and granddaughter who played together. On weekends, people gathered outside their window just to listen. Eleanor always left the window open so the music could drift out. She never charged, never performed for fame. She just played because she wanted to give back the love the world had shown her. Sometimes she saw people standing quietly on the sidewalk, their faces soft, their eyes wet with emotion, and every time she saw that, she would whisper to herself, "Thank you for listening." Lily began to make up her own songs too. She called one of them the Sunshine Tune, because she said it sounded like morning light. Another she named Grandma's Laugh, and every time she played it, Eleanor couldn't help but laugh exactly like the song's rhythm. Their home was filled with sound, sometimes soft, sometimes loud, but always full of love. One afternoon, as they sat by the piano, Eleanor received a letter in the mail. It was from the local community center, inviting her to teach a small music class for children who couldn't afford lessons. She read it twice, hardly believing her eyes. The words made her heart flutter. She had thought her teaching days were long over. She looked at Lily, who was painting at the table, and said softly, "Would you like to help Grandma teach music?" Lily's eyes widened. "Can we really?" she asked excitedly. Eleanor smiled. "Yes, my darling. We can." The following week, the class began. 10 children sat cross-legged around the old piano, their faces glowing with curiosity. Eleanor taught them gently, showing them that music wasn't just about notes. It was about feeling, about sharing stories without words. Lily sat beside her, proudly demonstrating the song she had learned. The children adored her, calling her Little Miss Melody, and she giggled every time they said it. Eleanor watched them, her heart swelling with pride, realizing that the same piano that had once been their lifeline was now changing other lives too. As months passed, their home became a small beacon of hope. People came not just to hear the music, but to feel the peace that lived within those walls. It was as if the melody that once echoed in a lonely train station had now bloomed into a garden of love. Eleanor often sat by the window at night, gazing at the stars, her hands resting on the piano keys. She would close her eyes and think of all they had been through. The nights of hunger, the rain, the cold, the applause, the kindness, and she would whisper softly, "Thank you for every note that led us here." One evening, as the sky turned golden, Lily ran into the room, waving a paper in her hand. "Grandma, Grandma, the mayor wants us to play at the town festival," she shouted. Jumping up and down, Eleanor laughed in disbelief. "Us? At the festival?" "Yes," Lily said. "They said everyone wants to hear our song." Eleanor looked at her, smiling with tears in her eyes. "Then we shall play, my little one. We shall play for everyone." The night of the festival came. The crowd was larger than anything Eleanor had ever seen, lights twinkling like stars across the park. She sat beside Lily on a grand stage, her old fingers trembling. But when the first note rang out, all fear disappeared. Their music floated through the air, soft and sweet, carrying every memory, every tear, every moment of love they had ever lived. The audience fell silent, listening, feeling, understanding. When they finished, the world around them erupted in applause, but this time, Eleanor didn't cry. She simply smiled, holding Lily's hand, knowing that this was not an ending, but a beginning. That night, as they walked home under the stars, Lily said softly, "Grandma, we made everyone happy." Eleanor looked down at her and said, "Yes, my dear, but the truth is they made us happy first." And as they stepped through their front door, the soft light of home wrapped around them like a warm embrace. The piano stood waiting, their old friend, ready for the next song, and for the first time in her life, Eleanor felt something she had never felt before: complete peace. Because home wasn't just four walls, it was music, love, and the promise of tomorrow. Months passed, and the little house by the park had become a place of light and laughter,
Eleanor and Lily's days were filled with music, smiles,
and moments that stitched themselves into memory like golden threads. The piano that had once sat forgotten in a dusty train station now stood proudly in their living room. Its polished surface reflected the sunlight each morning, as if it too had been reborn for Eleanor. Every day felt like a gift she never thought she'd live to see. Each morning began the same way. Lily would wake up first, her tiny feet patting across the wooden floor as she ran straight to the piano. She would press a few keys softly, her giggles filling the house. "Wake up, Grandma. The music is waiting," she would say. Eleanor would laugh, stretch her arms, and join her. Sitting beside her on the stool together, they played their morning song, a simple tune they had created together, a mix of laughter, memory, and love. People still came to visit, neighbors, friends, even strangers who had once seen their video online. Some brought flowers, some brought cookies, some just came to listen. No one ever left without smiling. There was something about their home, something invisible but powerful, like a warm melody you could feel in your heart. Eleanor often said, "It's not the piano that makes music, it's the love around it," and everyone who heard her believed it. One afternoon, a letter arrived in the mail, sealed with gold edges. Lily brought it to her grandmother. Waving it like a little flag, Eleanor opened it carefully and gasped softly. It was an invitation. A local concert hall wanted them to perform at a special event called Songs of the Heart. It was a charity concert to raise money for children without homes. Eleanor's hands trembled as she read it, her eyes welling up with tears. She looked at Lily and whispered, "We started with nothing, and now we can help others who are where we once were." Lily hugged her tightly and said, "Then let's play the happiest song in the world." Grandma. The night of the concert arrived. The hall was grand, with glittering lights and rows of people dressed in their best clothes. Eleanor sat quietly backstage, her hands folded. Her heart pounding gently in her chest, she looked at Lily, wearing a small white dress and holding her hand proudly. "Are you nervous?" Lily asked, her eyes full of excitement. Eleanor smiled softly. "No, my love. I'm just grateful." When their names were called, the hall fell silent. Eleanor and Lily walked onto the stage together, the crowd watching as the lights dimmed. The piano stood under a single spotlight, shining like it was made of dreams. Eleanor sat down slowly, her hands finding their familiar place on the keys. Lily climbed onto the small bench beside her, her feet dangling above the floor. And then, without a word, they began to play. The melody started softly like a whisper from the past. It was the same tune they had played that day in the train station, the day the world first heard their hearts. But now it sounded fuller, warmer, as if it had grown up with them. Eleanor's fingers danced with strength and grace, while Lily's laughter added sweetness to every note. The audience was silent, completely spellbound. Some closed their eyes, some wiped tears, but everyone felt the same thing: peace, hope, love, all wrapped in sound. Halfway through, Eleanor looked at Lily and smiled. Without missing a note, she whispered softly, "This is your song now." "My little one?" Lily looked up at her grandmother, her eyes shining like stars. "No, Grandma," she said softly. "It's our song." The music swelled, filling the room like sunlight spilling through clouds. It was more than a performance, and it was a memory, a thank you, a prayer. And when the final note lingered in the air, the hall remained silent for a moment. Then suddenly everyone stood up, clapping and cheering, the sound echoing like thunder mixed with tears. Eleanor bowed her head, overwhelmed. She looked at Lily, who was waving at the crowd, her smile brighter than any light in the room. At that moment, Eleanor felt time stand still. All the years of struggle, pain, and loneliness melted away, replaced by pure joy. She had found not just a home, but a purpose, to share love through music. And in that single heartbeat, she knew that her life had come full circle. After the concert, people came to meet them. A child hugged Lily and said, "You're my hero." A woman held Eleanor's hands and whispered, "Your song healed me." Eleanor simply smiled and said, "It healed me too." That night, they returned home under a sky full of stars. The air was cool and gentle, carrying the sound of distant crickets and laughter. Lily held her grandmother's hand and whispered, "Grandma, will we always play together?" Eleanor smiled and said, "Always, my love. Even when we can't see each other, the music will keep us close." Days turned into weeks, and weeks into months. The piano never stopped singing. Even when Eleanor grew too weak to play long, Lily would take over, her young fingers carrying the melody forward. Sometimes Eleanor would sit in her chair, eyes closed, listening, smiling softly. It was as if the music had become part of her soul. One afternoon, as Lily played softly by the window, Eleanor whispered, "Promise me you'll keep our song alive." Lily nodded, her voice trembling but brave. "I promise, Grandma. I'll play it forever," and so she did. Long after the seasons changed, long after the world moved on, the sound of their song continued, in recordings, in hearts, in memories. People still spoke about the day a homeless grandmother and her little granddaughter filled a station with love. Their story became a symbol, proof that music could change lives, that love could find its way even through the hardest paths. And somewhere in that same old station where it all began, the restored piano still stood, waiting patiently for wandering hands. Sometimes travelers stopped to play it, not knowing the story. But if they listened closely, if they really listened, they could feel it. The echo of laughter, the warmth of love, the spirit of two souls who once made the world pause and smile. Because love like that never fades, and songs like theirs never truly end. They live on in every heart they've touched, in every hand that dares to play, and as long as someone listens, somewhere out there, the music of Eleanor and little Lily will keep playing, softly, beautifully, endlessly, a song that never ends.